Welcome back. In that last video, we had some fun figuring out how to set up for localization and see how annoying it is. And then I provided a great solution of something I built that is just a life changer for me on the projects I work on. And yeah, now we're actually going to kind of wrap up this topic because we want a way to, of course, not just we don't we can't just like change the code. Unless we were putting out multiple apps, we could do a build, version with English set, and then we could do a build with Spanish set and just put those out. That is possible, but Apple definitely doesn't like that. I don't think Google likes that. They want one app, that you're gonna basically put out. So we want a way to allow the user to change their language, but also we want to set the default based on their device settings. So let's figure this out. What we're going to do first is we are going to make a new feature. And let's just call this folder L10N as the feature. And inside here, we're going to have a provider. And we're going to have a new file. And we're just going to locale provider.dart. And we're going to create a lovely Riverpod provider. So let's just look at, just like I remember the syntax for this. Any of these should work. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to have at Riverpod. We will do our keep alive as true. We will import in the things we need, like Riverpod annotation, for instance. And then we actually have a class, and we're going to call this locale. And it's going to extend underscore locale. Okay. Then actually, calling this locale is going to be a problem because there already is actually something called locale in Flutter. Like, we'll see if we do this. What can we call this then? Maybe we call it like user locale, something like that, or device locale. How about locale settings? So it'll be locale settings provider. So we want to keep that the same. And we need a build function, of course. So what is it going to return? Well, it's going to return a locale, which is why we couldn't call it that, which we want to get from, I guess, from material. Do we want it from Dart? I'll just do it from material for now, and we'll see if that causes a problem. So it's going to return a locale in its build. And we need to, of course, make an override here. Override. And for now, let's just return locale dot from subtags and language code en, just as a default. Then, of course, we need to remember our little part thing, and we want this to be part of locale provider. We'll save that. We're going to run our make gen watch, which actually I need to get into the right folder here. Make gen watch, so that we get our generator running, but also watching in case we made a mistake. The second time it'll run a lot faster. And again, that is just a command, an alias we made, which is running flutter pub run build runner watch delete conflicting outputs. Don't have to remember that. We can just remember our lovely make commands. All right, it succeeded. So now we have this lovely thing. Now let's go back. Let's go to our main.dart. And in our main.dart, we have something where we're setting our locale, but instead of just hard coding here, what we can do is we can go ref.watch and get our locale settings provider. And again, this conforms to it because we're returning this type. We're watching, the state of it, and everything will be good. So let's just test to make sure that kind of works. So we're set to English now. And is this still? I just want to make sure. I think I have to rebuild the app because we restarted VS Code in the last thing. Let us let me just double check. Yeah, it's not running, or the debugger's not going. So I'm just going to get that rerunning. Oh, yeah, it's going to go to the simulator, and then we'll be able to actually test this out to make sure it is working. All right, app is built. So what I'm going to do, we should see everything is in English. Now, we've only changed two things, just these two words, but we're seeing they're in English. Let's change this to ES as sort of the default. Now, we will have to rebuild for this because this gets set when it first gets going, and there we have it. So now we're relying on this provider. Now, we actually want to get the device language. So we can make a variable, we'll call it locale, and we can get it by using our, let me remember how to do this. Device language. Yeah. So we want to get access to something, and we can do this by using platform dot locale name, and this will give us a string. And what we want to then probably check is make sure, what is this right here? This is a string, so maybe we'll call this locale name. And sometimes this can throw an error. So we're actually going to wrap this in a try catch E. And what we'll actually do is make this a string before. So we're just going to do string, locale string. We're going to make this a final late, a late final, because we're not going to create it in this exact moment, but we're saying it will be created before it's ever accessed. So now we'll change this to here. We'll try that. Something might go wrong, in which case we will set locale name equal to, we'll just fall back to en. Now I'm thinking about this. I actually haven't done a late final in this sort of case. It might actually like cause an error. So let's actually not make it final at all, and we'll actually just set it, to an empty string at first. So basically we'll use the locale name and then it'll do that. Then we need to make sure that it is within our supported locales. So let's just make this kind of dirty for now, and we'll make it better in a bit. But yeah, what do we want here? We want to make sure if locale, or if we'll just make an array. We want en, es. If en and es dot contains the locale name, we're good. So we'll actually negate that, meaning if it doesn't contain this, then again we'll take our locale name and set it back to en as sort of our fallback default. Then we can basically now use this locale name right here to sort of get our settings. So let's just make sure that works. We'll refresh. We should, in theory, see our stuff in English. Now, if we go to our developer setting, or just our settings in general on our phone, on our simulator, we can change our device language. So let's go general, language and region, and we're going to add a language. I'm going to add Spanish. I'm going to just use, just normal Spanish. Use Spanish. And now it's going to restart. And the problem, something that's kind of annoying right now, is the app, our app got fully terminated there just for making that change, I believe. Yeah, we have like this thing. Oh, no, it's still good, but we don't have the Flutter, access to the Flutter anymore. So let's, we have to rerun our build again to get this, part working. I believe we can switch languages. It's just because we installed like a fully new one, or like added a new one. It did that. I don't recall though. All right, we're back up and running. I'm actually going to print out the locale name because I don't think it's actually correct what we're using. ES_CA. So, okay. So that's like the locale name. What we really care about for our cases, and if you were trying to support like, English Canadian versus English UK versus US, like you would, want to work with this, but we're keeping this simple, just English and Spanish. So what I'm actually going to do is, so we have our locale name. Let's actually make its default EN US, capitals like that. And then what we're going to do is actually make a variable called language name, I guess, language code. And we're going to take our locale name and split it on the underscore and do dot first. I will say there's probably some packages and stuff to do this, even better. But I'm just trying to explain, like, what is really going on instead of relying on some black magic. So now this will be just whatever. And we actually want to check this to make sure it is this. We should also just let's set it to lowercase just in case, because that's what we want to check. So we want to check that. Otherwise, we're going to set language code, which means this actually has to be a string. so, like a non-final variable, because we might change it over here. And then we use language code, and we want to make sure we're using language code here. Okay, so let's save that, and let's just rebuild. Because again, this get Riverpod setting this right here, and we do see we have Spanish now. So it is using our device language. Remember, otherwise it would be falling back to English US, but we're using the device language. So that's half the battle, which is great. But we want to give our users the ability to change their language. You know, they might be bilingual, they might, you know, and obviously for testing purposes, we want a way to sort of do this. So let us have a function in our provider called set locale. Or let's do set language code. And we'll just do a string language code. And actually, let's make an enum for this. Enum languages. Or let's call it like supported languages. And we're going to have en, and we're going to have es. And what we'll also do is use lovely things that we can do with enums and actually have some sort of dynamic or some configuration with them. So we're going to have a final string called language code, for instance. And we're going to require this as the first parameter, this.language code, which means when we define en, we're going to have en. When we have es, we're going to have es. And maybe there'll be some other things we have in here, but this is just, you know, sort of nice. So we're going to actually pass in this. We'll just call it like language for this context. And what we want to do is kind of reuse some of this sort of logic to, you know, basically set it. So we're ultimately going to make state equal to something, but state needs to be a locale. I guess actually, yeah, it's just going to be locale from subtags, and we'll use our language code. And here we will take language dot language code, which will access basically this here. Let me make some stuff a little more better. So we're using the enum, and we can actually say dot language code to get that. Okay, so we have something to set language. This is a void function, and we're just updating the state, and everything is good. However, I see an error somewhere. It's a missing semicolon, as is tradition. Okay, so now what we need to do is we want to build like a little widget or something. So do we have a settings page yet? I think we do. Yeah, we have a settings page. Awesome. Let's go to our settings screen, and let's see. Where's the word logout? There's our button. Is that all that's on this screen? That is, yeah. So let's obviously make this a little bit better. Let us return a column. Actually, let's use a list view. Not a list view.builder, but a list view. And let's just, you know, have some children in here. Let's have a list tile. I love my list tiles. And let's have a title. I'm just going to remake logout to, you know, work like this. And on tap, we're going to just basically take our same code that we had here, which means we just make it async. So it's going to go and log out. Maybe there's a subtitle text, log out. Yeah, we don't need a subtitle. People know what log out means. But let's have a icon. Oh, how do we? Oh, sorry, it's leading. And here we'll use an icon. Icons dot. I think there's like sign out, a log out, log out. Yeah. Okay. So we'll have that. Let's just see if this looks a little bit better. Cool. Good enough. And let's just copy this list tile we made. And we're going to call this something called language. And here maybe we use like, so like language. What's the language thing? Let's get rid of the on tap event. Yeah, that seems fine. So now we have a, you know, a little bit better design of our thing. And what we can actually do here is we can maybe have a subtitle. And here we'll do our ref.watch, our locale settings provider. And then we need to get access to it, you know, let's see what toString does. Oh, what's this error meaning? String, oh, because, yeah, this has to obviously be wrapped in text. So let's just see what that looks like. I'm not sure what the toString is, so it's just apparently ES. We might want to create some nice mapping of this. Is there a toLanguage tag? Seems to be the same thing. yeah, let's create a little mapping thing for this. These I'm just trying to think the best way to do this. You know what? I'm not going to worry about that. Let's just get the functionality working. So we have that. Cool. Now we need a way for them to, this on tap doesn't do anything. We need a way to basically change the language. So we get rid of the on tap because we're going to have, I think, a trailing. Do we have a drop down button so far in this thing? Button, probably not the word button. Pop up, pop up. Okay, I guess we don't. So we're going to make a pop-up menu button or something, something like that. Let me just search for one more things. Value, label. No, we don't have that. Okay, so what do we want? We want a... We're going to create a drop-down button. And the drop-down button will be of type. What is the type that we're going to have in it? I think let's use supported languages. Let's actually let it use those as its thing. And in here, we are going to have a value. And the value will be, ooh, okay, yeah, this is where, yeah, part of me wants to change this whole thing. Instead of sending a locale back, I actually am going to, I'm going to rename this to supported language. And that's what we're going to return from this now. Okay, cool. No, that's not going to work for us very well either, unless we have another provider that's relying on this provider. I'm trying to do this in a really good way. Okay, let's put this back how it was. And we do have an error. Oh, it's just this error here. That makes sense. So let's actually, we'll just use locale as the sort of option here. And its value is going to basically be this right here. And then I think we need an onChange event, which this will be the updated value. And here is where we do ref.read, and we'd use our same thing right here, but it's notifier dot set language code. And here we actually have to pass in a language, and I think that's why, yeah, so let's actually pass in this here, and we'll actually just change the state equal to that, state equals language. That'll just simplify things for us. And here we just have to make it value, but we also have to check to make sure it's not null, because in theory, it could be null according to this. So if value does not equal null, we'll do that. And then we're missing something else here. Items, that makes sense. We need to say what's in here. So we could do this in a few ways. I'm just for this purpose going to hard code some things. I think this has to be, what is this a list of? Drop down menu item. So we're going to have a drop down menu item. Its child will be text, and we will use the word English. But it also needs a value because that's what gets passed into here. So the value itself will be, and we can just construct a locale from subtags and just use the language code en. In future, we might, optimize some of this stuff, and we'll make this Spanish and es. And we're getting a warning because the child should be the last thing in these sorts of things, so that the widget trees don't look completely ridiculous, only a little ridiculous. Okay, and then what I want to do is I actually want to hard code Spanish in Spanish, which is español. See, I didn't use a French accent that time. So let's just, do I have Google Translate still open? So English to Spanish, because it makes sense to show, oh yeah, there's two options. We'll use the feminine one. makes sense to show it in their language, because if you're like confused and you're like, oh, what's my thing, and then you're seeing it in your language, you'll know, what to do. All right, so I think that's all we have to do there. So now we see this sort of thing here, and if I change it, it's now going to English. So let's see if this is actually working. We see the word posts here, which is cool, and we can go back here, change it to Espanol, and we go back here, it's now in Spanish. So that's all working. Now, the only thing that we're missing from this puzzle, I'd say, is the fact that like we want this to be remembered. So when someone closes the app or clicks the green arrow rebuild, it's going to go back to English. What do we have our default as? Oh yeah, no, it's going to go back to Spanish. Let's just test my theory, because we set our device language to Spanish. So let's go to English. Everything's in English. It's great. And if we rebuild, we're going to go back to Spanish because it's just relying on the device language. So the last piece of the puzzle is, how do we actually remember remember this value? So I'm just going to close a bunch of things because we're going to set up something. Now, we're going to add a local database to our project. Now, there's many database options out there, ones that are like SQL based, ones that are like more like a MongoDB, like a JSON collection based thing. But for these kind of things, which are like what I call user preferences that don't need to be secure in any way, they don't need multiple records, it's just a key value thing, I always just go back to the shared preferences package. And sometimes people are like, don't use this, it's not secure or whatever. But like, we're not really doing something that matters. It's literally the word we're storing. Like, we're going to store like if they like English or Spanish, so this is a perfect thing for this. And in fact, virtually anything you do in your app, like you can't store anything secure in a client-side app anyways. The one exception, and the reason not to use shared preferences for things like API tokens and that kind of stuff, is if you are going to deploy this to web, there are security vulnerabilities around using local storage, which is what the web one uses, so that other apps can technically like get access to things like that. So although you can't think of security as like blocking it from the user who's using it, anything that's client-side, website, anything that's stored client-side, even if it's in your code and it's obfuscated, it can be found, it can be figured out. Even if you have an SSL certificate, it can be intercepted. There's nothing protecting someone who controls that device. That's why we do those kind of things server side. But yeah, for this, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares if someone finds it? Oh my gosh, their language is English. Now we know. It's like, yeah, I mean, you can kind of tell. All right, so we're going to install shared preferences. And where are we here? Terminal. Yeah, oops, I didn't mean to actually do that. Flutter, pub, add, shared preferences. Now this is a package that has some native stuff on it. So we actually, again, have to do another rebuild here. So I'm just going to stop it and just open our main.dart and rerun it in the background so that it can install those native packages. If it was just web, it wouldn't be a problem because there's no native stuff in web anyways. It's just JavaScript. Okay, so now we have shared preferences, and that's great. All right, the next thing I want to do is we want to have a way to access our storage. Now, we could just use the shared preferences library, out the gate. And actually, you know what? Let's do that first, just so we understand the problem and stuff. And then we will actually build sort of a wrapper for it, which has some value. Like, we can kind of do it in a way that we want to work with it. But the biggest value, I'd say, is say you want to swap shared preferences for something else in the future, or use a different one on web versus this. We're going to, essentially, like we're doing in our sort of semi-clean architecture way, we're going to make it agnostic in that way so that we're only working with our own thing and it's behind the scenes doing things, meaning if we change it, we just have to change a code in one spot. That's what we're going to do. But we are going to just start with working with shared preferences in its most basic form, just to see how we can make it better. Okay, so while that's building, let's go to our locale provider. And what we want to do is we're going to store essentially a string. So we can write data simply by doing this. So let's just, again, do this kind of in this crappy way, I would say. what we'll do is take our shared preferences here. So I'm going to make an access to it. Oh, this can't be async. So we're going to make a function in here called void save save preferred locale to storage, to make it very specific. This will be technically a future void, and we make it async, so we can do this. So yeah, we now have our access to our preferences singleton. Make sure there wasn't some other setup. I feel like there's one other thing we want to do, but I could be wrong. We're probably fine. Okay, so there we have our preferences. Then, according to their docs, we want to write something. So we're going to do, we're going to set a string. We're going to store this as a string because that's all we really need to do. And here we'll just use the word language, sure. And then we, of course, need to pass in a language, or we could pass in a locale. I think we'll just make it a language code, at least for now. And let's just store that. And that's all good. It can just fire and forget. I don't even know if this returns anything. Let's just see. Oh, it is a bool. I guess bool meaning it worked or not. Let's just have success. And let's just, for our own sake, at least for now, if not success. Actually, let's do if success, print saved language. And we can even use the language code here. Else print error saving language. Just for our own little debugging purposes. And then what we want to do here is actually just invoke this. Now, you might be wondering, oh, but this is an asynchronous function. Oops. So we want to take our language code, of course, Python there. But that's fine. It's not like we have to wait for this to complete to finish. And if we did, this would be a problem because then this would become an async provider and be a pain to work with. This is just going to get fired off. It'll go on to this next line right away, like in the same frame, basically. And this will happen sometime shortly after. It doesn't really matter. It can happen, even if it happened like 10 seconds later, it wouldn't be the biggest problem unless someone closed their app in 10 seconds. So let's just see if that even works. So this should just happen right on build, meaning it's going to take whatever the device language is. And if we go to our debug console, we see saving language, yes. Okay, cool. So then what we really want to do here is whenever we set the language, we're going to do something similar too. We want to save that setting. And again, we don't have to wait it or anything. We could if we wanted to like show a an error or something like that. But we're just going to call it, and make that happen. So okay, we have our language, and now language dot language code, and this is where we kind of have to do this like, sort of annoying thing. So I'm just going to do this and take our language. It's actually language dot locale name, or well, maybe it is just it's probably just language code dot split. And then we just need to basically set this here. Lastly, what we need to do is we have sort of this stuff here, but we want to now check, oh yeah, this is where there's going to be a problem because of the asynchronous nature of, actually wait, is reading data asynchronous? It's not. That's great. So we can actually we have to await it when we're saving stuff, but to get a value, it's actually synchronous. That's perfect for us right now. So what we would do is we're going to yeah, but here's the problem. We actually have to get this. So for now, and I said we're going to make this better, but it's fine. I'm just going to make something. How can we start this? Let me just look up a couple things before I go in a rabbit hole and confuse. Okay, so what we're going to do in our main.dart, we have this run function. We're going to basically make something called shared preferences here. This is, again, just temporary. It's a kind of a really bad global way of doing it. We're going to make this a late final. We are going to be making this better. It'll become, a Serverpod singleton and all that kind of stuff. But what we're going to do is we can make our main.dart this. Another thing we should just be doing while we're here in general is we want to actually make sure our widget bindings are initialized. So that's just a normal thing in most Flutter apps. You want to put that. So we're going to put that. And then we're going to actually set prefs equal to this. And that is fine. And then instead of getting access to it here, we're just going to import it right from our main.dart, which, oops, prefs. This comes from main.dart. Good. So back to what we're doing. So this will happen first before we even run the app, and everything's great, meaning it's already set up. So what we want to check now is we'll just make a value called saved language preference. What do we call this? Save language preference. Let's call it save language equals. And here we will use our prefs.getString. And we want to use that key. And here's one of those like ugly things where we're going to be copying and pasting a string, something that I've talked about a lot. Saved language equals this. Now this is a string, but it could be null. And we want to check if saved language does not equal null. If it does not equal null, we want to set our locale name basically to our saved language. Otherwise, that's when we want to kind of do, a bunch of things. Actually, let's make this even better. Let's put our string language code equal here as well, because we can actually just set, instead of setting that, we can actually use the language code because that's what we're storing. Else, we do all this stuff. Let's leave it there. We can get rid of this right here because we're actually going to use the language code there. And then we'll still do this check after, because maybe something we don't want to rely on the user's storage as like the source of truth for like whether it exists. So we're going to do that. Okay, so basically what will happen, it will check, is that key set? Okay, cool. If it's not, we're just going to use language code for that. And it will just skip all this other stuff, and then we'll just make sure again, okay, the language code is allowed in there, and then we'll do, and we'll take this. Now this save, we don't really have to resave it here, but we should be saving it in the case that this happened, right? Basically, like we didn't have one before. Let's save it just for next time. It'll, just make our lives easier. We don't have to run all this stuff again. Okay, so, and then in here, yeah, we're setting language code, we're saving. Okay, so I think we're good. Let me see if this is working. So we refreshed, we are in Spanish, and let's go to our settings, and let's make it English. And go back here, we're in English. Now, in theory, if we built this correctly, we should be back, and it's English again. We can just test one more time. Might as well. Spanish, back to Spanish, boom. We are basically done here. We're still in Spanish. All right, cool. I'm gonna leave it right there. So like I alluded to, I want to make working with storage a lot better, but I think that's a video on it itself to actually set that up, because we're going to be using storage for probably other preferences too. I'm not even sure what, but definitely language is a good thing to put in there. But I want to work with it better because there's a lot of problems here. One, we have this like global variable here. That's terrible. I hate that. The only time I will ever use a global variable like this is usually for like your scaffold messenger keys and that kind of stuff. Secondly, we kind of have this annoying thing where we have typing these sorts of things. I don't like that. And I just don't like working directly with the shared preferences library in our implementations, because again, if we wanted to switch to something else, we would have to rewrite all of our code. In this case, it would just be like 2 files, but imagine you're using storage in 20 files, 30 files, and then you're like, oh, shared preferences doesn't cut it for me anymore. I'm going to Hive or something. We want to make kind of something more abstract that we can work with, and that's the plan. So we might cover it in the next one. It may be a few away. I haven't given it much thought, but this works for now, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a great day.